For the first time ever, I am thrilled to say we have an official sponsor for the Dirt Talk podcast, and that's Ariat. I've worn Ariat boots on every job site I've visited over the years, traveling in them across 5 continents. More importantly, I have yet to find a single project where working folks, unlike me, are not wearing Ariat boots and workwear in every condition imaginable. And there's really good reason for that, and that's because it's phenomenal stuff. And the more I've learned about Ariat and the company, the more I've loved their brand. So with this, Ariat is offering any Dirt Talk listener 10% off their next Ariat order at ariat.com/dirttalk. That's 10% off boots, jeans, and workwear at ariat.com/dirttalk or at the link in this episode's description. With that, let's get to the show. How many times have you spoken now? Just countless? Who knows?
Like live, like engagement stuff.
Yeah.
Man, I don't know, hundreds. Yeah, quite a bit.
So are you still active duty?
I am. My primary professional obligation is to the United States Army.
Yeah.
But nowadays, quite a bit that I do for the Army is very similar, if not sometimes the exact same stuff that I do with my business. It's just, am I in the uniform or not? Am I talking to a military audience or a private sector?
But it's all similar.
Very similar in a lot of ways.
Okay.
So the reps are coming in more and more often now.
How does that work, being in the military and also doing civilian stuff, private sector stuff?
So it's totally legal, totally ethical.
Yeah.
There's a process in which you need to go through if you're going to do it totally above board, which I did.
Yeah.
Of submitting like what the business is to your JAG course, or like the lawyers that advise the commander. Sure. At the end of the day, it's the commander's decision.
Okay.
To say like, you can do this. It's called moonlighting, which is the same term we would use for like a side hustle.
Yeah.
Can totally do it. Like, no problem. With me, it was a little bit of a challenge because I'm so forward facing and so in the public, because only the Army can pay you to be a soldier.
Uh-huh.
Now, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
So if you start talking about like tactics and like marksmanship and some of these like very like direct infantry or military soldiering skills, you start to get into a bit of a unethical scenario.
Sure.
With me, it's like leadership, resilience, mindset. I'm deriving a lot of these recommendations and curriculums from my time in the military, but I'm me.
Yeah.
Whereas if you were an active duty soldier and you're like, I want to start a landscaping company, I'm going to cut lawns on the weekends. It's like, no problem, go. Like that's very clean cut, no big deal.
If I'm going to go teach military tactics,
then you start to, it becomes more subjective.
Yeah.
And the challenge with that is this commander's decision. Well, our commanders rotate every 12 to 24 months. So it's a new person in the chair every single time.
Sure.
So I was doing this like over and over and over again. And eventually I was like, okay, I'm going to take this to like a really high level of command and get kind of a blanket policy from them.
Interesting.
So I'm not having to do this over and over and over again.
I see.
So now I operate under that legal and ethical review, which as long as I abide by these left and right limits, I'm good to go.
That's fascinating. How long have you been in the military now?
Coming up on 18 years.
Oh, wow. So you've been in a long time.
Yeah, a little bit.
Wow. How many times have you deployed? Quite a few in that.
A bunch. Yeah.
Did you get into the Army right after school?
After college.
After college.
Yeah.
Okay. So you went to college.
Went to college. Yep. 19 years old was 9/11 for me, and I watched it live, and that was really it.
That was that.
Yeah. I did stay in school, which was a struggle. I was going to drop out and join the military, like within a couple days of the attack. I stayed in school. I grinded out my degree, and then I went in not long after that.
Are you glad you stayed in school?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I gave me an extra few years of life experience, some more maturity, especially life as a Green Beret. I mean, we only go after an older group. You have to be 21 years old to be a Green Beret versus the other special ops units, even at 18. So as long as you can get into the service, you can try out for those units. With us, there's an age minimum, and that's based off the type of missions we have and the level of responsibility and trust. So I had an extra few years to just develop my character and grow up a little bit more.
Which I think the college, no college thing is obviously a heated debate right now. But I think that's the main value of college. It gives you 4 years to develop yourself as an individual, as an adult, without real world consequences, in a sense.
Yeah.
You have a lot of latitude in school,
Yeah.
and you can do a lot of dumb shit in school without real consequences. Like for most people, I understand there's scholarships and maybe you have a family, whatever it is. But if you're 18 and in 22, if you do it right, you won't know who you are by the time you're 22, but you can really develop yourself as an individual, especially if you've had parents breathing down your neck your whole life.
Yeah. I think it's a great tool, and it's like with any tool, you can choose how to wield it and how to leverage it.
Sure.
And you can, of course, dump hundreds of thousands of dollars into a piece of paper. If you even get the paper and it's worth shit in terms of your development, because you were just a knucklehead the entire time, didn't learn much, didn't develop much, like a lot of poor choices. Or you can leverage it for that time you have. Maybe it's the first time away from home. You got some responsibilities, some discipline, some work ethic. Choose your adventure in between there. So I think it's more on the individual to decide how much value they extract out of that kind of experience than like the system as a whole.
Yeah. Well, if you're leaning wholly on the system, you're screwed, I think.
I would probably agree as well. Yeah.
Was special forces, was that always the goal, or did that come up along the way?
It came up along the way.
Yeah.
I mean, I had started looking at the military when I was in high school, and it had nothing to do with patriotism, wanted to serve my country. It really didn't, man, to be honest. I had a massive emotional void in me that I wanted to fill. I grew up a small, scared, insecure kid, picked on, bullied, moved around quite a bit.
You're not small
Struggled
anymore.
Socially. No, that's changed. People have a hard time like grasping that when I say it. They see me, they're like, you were never small. I'm like, no, I was a peanut. I was a peanut. I wrestled at 123 my freshman year. I was a little guy.
Yeah.
I thought the military could give me the strength and kind of respect that I was looking for. And I probably would have done that had I not gotten recruited to play football in college. That was the only thing that really brought me to college, was I was an athlete.
Okay.
So, I mean, I did that. 9/11 happens. And then I really started taking the military more seriously, and getting into special operations was pretty much the goal at that point from the beginning.
I see.
I felt like with my athletic ability, I could be utilized in that capacity.
Mm-hmm.
But really, man, it was about making as much of an impact as one person could make in a short duration of time. Yeah. This was not intended to be a career at all. It was like, get in, get to the tip of the spear, kick some ass, get some payback for 9/11, and then get out and figure out what I want to do with the rest of my life.
Sure.
That was the game plan. And what changed that is I fell in love with it, man. And I just didn't want to do anything else.
What about it drew you in?
Mostly the people, the guys, like being on a detachment, it's a 12-man team designed to work as a split team. So 6 and 6. So even if you're as a single whole unit, you plus 11, that's a small group.
Sure.
And we are put into seemingly impossible scenarios within really harsh conditions to solve really difficult problems.
Yeah.
So the work is great, but it's, for me, what changed my love of the game and desire to make it into a lifestyle and a career was the guys I was working with. Just amazing humans that I was absorbing so much information from, and just developing me, not solely as a warrior, as an SF guy. It was as a man, just exponentially. I was like seeing my character and myself change on like a weekly basis. I was like, I don't think I'm going to find this anywhere else, and I don't even really want to try.
Yeah.
This is it.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
What does SF look for? Like you go to basic training, you're in the Army, then you go to Ranger school? No.
Nope.
Okay. Explain the order of
the
operations.
Process? Yeah, sure. So I came in as what's known as a Special Forces recruit, otherwise known as an 18 X-ray contract, meaning that a guy off the street, we're going to put you on a contract and on a pipeline, like a trajectory, so that you go straight into the Special Forces.
How do you get that? Do they just look at you? Like,
you have to meet some requirements. Yeah,
okay.
You have to do like a physical fitness test, an aptitude test. There's like some barriers of entry, background check. Like there's stuff you have to be able to do. You have to be smart enough, physically capable enough to have that contract as an option for you.
Okay.
I went in that route.
I see.
So for me, it was a basic training, which at the time was at Fort Benning, Georgia, which is now called Fort Moore.
Yeah.
You go from that straight into what's known as advanced individual training, which now you're actually learning your job. The job that you learn at that point is that of an infantryman.
Okay.
You're just learning basic infantry tactics and skills.
How to shoot, how to
move,
yeah.
patrol-based activities,
Yeah.
how to do dismounted foot movements.
How to be a soldier.
How to be a soldier.
Yeah.
How to be an infantry soldier.
Sure.
From there, you go to airborne school. You learn how to jump out of planes.
Okay.
You make it through that. Then you transition to Fort Bragg, which is North Carolina, now known as Fort Liberty.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're in the hands of the actual Green Berets. Now they take control of you. And now you're in kind of the special forces portion of your journey.
Interesting.
So you'll go into a prep course where they just beat the hell out of you physically for kind of an unknown period of time. It's like gladiator camp.
Yeah.
And when they feel you're ready to go to selection, you go to selection.
I see.
Then you go to selection, which is now it's a 21-day evolution.
Uh-huh.
When I went, it was 14. Brutal experience.
Yeah.
You get your ass kicked every day.
Uh-huh.
Not a lot of sleep, not a lot of food, just a lot of pain, right?
Yeah.
So you do that. And then if you get chosen, then you go into what's known as a Special Forces qualification course. And now you're just doing all these different phases of learning kind of the foundational skills and tactics and capabilities of a Green Beret.
Wow.
All of what I just described for me took just shy of 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
So you don't, okay. Yeah. I was completely mistaken then because I thought you had to go through the Ranger process.
Nope.
And then you go to the Green Beret process.
Negative. We get a lot of guys that come from Ranger Regiment.
Yeah.
A lot of our guys have already gone to Ranger school if they were already soldiers before they decided to try to become a Green Beret. Because my route was right off the street.
Yeah.
We also draw a lot of guys that are already soldiers, many of which have gone to Ranger school or have served in Ranger Regiment, which are two different things. And they've had that school as part of their train up.
Sure.
And a lot of Green Berets that come in off the street will eventually go to Ranger school. It just happens a little further down the line.
Okay.
So
I'm asking all like my 6-year-old questions first.
Perfect.
What does SF look for? Through that process, what are they trying to tease out? And through selection, who do they select and why?
Yeah. It's really, I would say, based on 3 primary attributes: physical capability, intellect, and character.
Okay.
And that's probably not all that like shocking. That's, I would say, most organizations are looking for people that can do those things to some degree or another.
Physical ability, not so much anymore.
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe in like corporate, you don't need someone to be able to like run 5 miles in 35 minutes, but you probably want them like healthy.
Yeah,
and like,
ideally, yeah.
Right, healthy. Like even I want this person to be around. I want to invest in them. I don't want them to drop dead in 6 months because they're a disaster.
Yeah.
So varying degrees of importance within those 3 buckets. But for us, it's really kind of a higher echelon of those 3 things. The physical aspect is what most people tend to focus on. I talk to aspiring Green Berets every single day from all around the country, which is amazing. And the focus is how fast do you need to be able to run? How many push-ups do you need to be able to do? Like what physical training can I do to make it through physically? Which is important. You have to have the physicality and the durability to make it through. Otherwise your body will shut off.
Yep.
But the intelligence and the character, I would argue, are significantly more important than that. Namely because they're both more difficult to teach someone else.
Yeah.
I can get you to be able to run 5 miles as fast as I need you to run it in a relatively short amount of time. You follow the protocol, you do the thing, you eat the right things, you get enough rest, you'll be there.
Yeah.
Increasing one's intelligence can take a lot longer, and certainly in modifying someone's character, it's doable, but it's a much more difficult task.
Yeah.
And the reason why those 2 things are, I would say, above the physical, which is the foundation, is we're put, again, into denied area, oftentimes completely cut off and remote from other friendly assets to solve really difficult problems. And those problems are solved mostly through our brain, our intelligence.
Yeah.
And then the character is directly related to trustworthiness. That's it. Like a whole bunch of senior commanders are going to drop you guys off somewhere to go do something on your own, you got to make a lot of really hard choices.
Sure.
You're talking about large amounts of cash. You're talking about toys that can kill lots of different people.
Yeah.
Trustworthiness, I would say, is the thing that we're looking for in most elite organizations, certainly in the Green Berets, is trustworthiness. We would rather take someone with a high degree of trustworthiness that's like a mid to even low degree of performance capability versus the opposite of that.
How do they
any day?
How do they tease that out in the process? They give you like $10,000 at the beginning, and you've got to hand in $10,000 at the end.
Not so much. There are scenarios. I mean, if we're talking specifically selection, like the very first thing where they're looking to see who has those character traits that we're willing to risk and invest in to build a Green Beret. If you're just talking about the initial point of selection, which today is 21 days of time, one of the ways in which they go about pulling some of that out is one by virtue of beating people down physically. And again, it doesn't matter how great of physical shape you're in, like you're going to get to a point of exhaustion.
Yeah.
The greater physical shape you're in, the longer you can go before you hit that breaking point.
Sure.
But selection's going to kick your ass. When you're physically depleted and exhausted, oftentimes that's when your true character and your true capability come to the surface.
Yeah.
When taking the shortcut is just that much more convincing to do, because you're smoked. Like, I know I need to get from point A to point B. I was told very specifically, you cannot do this. These are your guidelines. Outside of that, you need to move from point A to point B.
Yeah.
Okay. You reach that decision point of, man, if I do this, it's going to get me there that much quicker. I know I'm breaking a rule, but I'm exhausted and I have to make it to the end. What do you do in those moments?
Sure.
That's when someone's character comes to the surface.
And that's what they're looking for.
That's what they're looking for.
They almost set you up for stuff like that.
Literally set you up for stuff like that. I'm talking like that scenario is not just meant figuratively, that's meant literally as well.
Yeah.
You're going to move from point A to point B, okay? Across like terrain with a lot of weight on your back when you're already sleep deprived and exhausted. Knowing that on that route from A to B, there are multiple different physical points on the earth in which these decision points are going to be put in front of a candidate.
Sure.
And they will put instructors and cadre right there.
Like a nice,
physically.
nice road, for example.
Nice road, for example.
Yeah.
Comfy, warm, inviting, dry, right? Smooth, flat versus the topography disaster that you probably should be going into. I'm going to take this. And right there is an instructor in a ghillie suit, in a hide that you can't see, on night vision, waiting to see what you do.
Wow, yeah.
And the thing is, man, is like the instruction that's given to you is incredibly simple and basic. It's not complex. It's not complicated. Move from point A to point B. Don't do this or this or this. Any questions? Go.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
But your true character rises to the surface when you are met with those dilemmas.
It's interesting you say intelligence too. I grew up in Scottsdale, Arizona. So there wasn't a lot of land nav growing up in my world. But then a few years ago, I did a course with somebody, and there was land navigation required. It was the first time I'd really had to do land navigation in a serious sense. And it was really hard. It requires a lot of problem solving, a lot of intelligence. You can't, and I view myself as like a mildly intelligent individual, but it made me feel like such an idiot because just the simplest stuff. And we were with somebody that would let us run off course for a substantial period of time and just watch us and watch. And then he'd ask, simple question. Hey, did you think about this? And you're just like, I didn't think about that. And you realize like, man, I'm such an idiot. And so even something that simple, getting from point A to point B without your phone it requires a certain degree of problem solving and intelligence that at least I underestimated before I did it. Now it's like, wow. And that was level 1 of 1,000 that I experienced.
Yeah. It's funny because you can argue that today's generation, it's perhaps even slightly more difficult for them. Using this exact example of land nav. Like I grew up with like MapQuest and atlases.
Yes.
That's how you got from point A to point B.
Yep.
Whether you were driving or walking, that was totally the way. Like we didn't have GPS in vehicles. We didn't have smartphones where you like click a button and like it literally You can't, it's idiot proof.
Yep.
We didn't have those things. So I, growing up, had a sense of what a map is, a physical map, how to use it, and then how to follow instructions on go a mile and a half this direction, take a left, blah, blah, blah. 18-year-old, 19, 20-year-old kids today, we're speaking Chinese right now.
Yeah.
That is a non-thing.
Yeah.
Which is kind of scary in a lot of sense, but I also get it's just the evolution of technology and this efficiencies in the way we do business. So you put a map, a compass, and a protractor in the hands of an 18-year-old today, it's a whole different human than when you put that same thing in my hands at that age. I was at least somewhat used to the fact that like this is a method of navigating.
Sure. Yeah, it's like, it reminds me of the meme where, someone drove into the lake. It's like, well, Google said, go this way.
Yeah.
They take it so literally.
Right.
They can
Roger that.
Drive right in the left.
Yeah.
It's like, come on, man.
Uh-huh.
So you were a kid, you become, a Green Beret. How long are you a Green Beret? You have one leg.
Correct.
And it's quite obvious. First thing you see.
Boom.
How long were you operating as a Green Beret before that happened?
Let's see. This was my third trip into Afghanistan when this happened. I was, about 3 years.
So not that long.
No, pretty early on. Yeah. I mean, after my training.
Yeah.
So after the first 2 or so years of training, I get to the teams. 3 years later, boom.
So
gone.
You said once you weren't anticipating it being a career. Then you get in, you fall in love with the people, the job.
Yeah.
So were those 3 years like, I'm going to be here for a long time? This is it. This is what I'm doing for a long time.
I mean, I got to the teams, me and my team, we were in Afghanistan probably 4 or 5 months later on my first trip.
Yeah.
And it was maybe a month into that deployment, which was a 9-month deployment.
Uh-huh.
Maybe a month into it was when it kind of flipped, and I'm like, this is what I do.
Yeah.
And in fact, I re-enlisted and extended my contract, even though I didn't need to, for another, I maxed it out. It was another 6 years on top of whatever I had currently to still serve.
You were just in.
I was it. I was all in, and this is all I want to do. I'm going to just invest everything into being the best team guy that I can be.
In SF, do you spend more time on deployment than a typical soldier does?
Yeah, we deploy nonstop.
Yeah. Okay.
During peak GWAT, global war on terrorism, our conventional assets were deploying pretty often.
Pretty nonstop.
And typically, conventional units would deploy for longer duration.
Mm-hmm.
Things have changed a little bit since then, but usually a unit would go for, say, 12 months, sometimes even longer, 15-month deployments.
Wow.
Maybe with a little 1 or 2 week break in between, comes called R&R, where you get a little gap.
Uh-huh.
So that would be pretty standard for a conventional infantry unit.
Okay.
They would do that, but then they wouldn't redeploy again sometimes for, years after that. Us, the frequency is way up, but the duration is typically lower.
Uh-huh.
So we would typically push for anywhere from 4 to 9 months at a time. 6 is kind of a sweet spot for an SF team, but we would be going every year.
Yeah.
Boom, boom,
Just
boom,
nonstop.
boom. And that turnover at the time was totally normal. It's a little bit more regulated now.
Uh-huh.
We have realized, we as in the special ops enterprise have realized kind of the burnout effect that happens when you push these dudes that aggressively, and they push themselves that aggressively.
Sure.
I mean, I got back from a 9-month deployment. I had, I think, 90 days, and then I was going again.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to go back.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like I was being ordered to go, but I was perfect. That's where I want to be anyway.
Sure.
So when you're early on in your career, it's that's what you want to do. That's the lifestyle. It's normal. You're into it, but it can take a minute for some of those compounding effects to kind of come to the surface, and you see the costs.
And you have 90 days off, quote unquote, but mentally it's probably really difficult. You're in such a wildly different environment. And I can only imagine. I can in a very small way understand. I'll travel. I went to Europe and we did 8 countries, different job site every day, different people every day. It's just sensory overload. And then you just come home, and you almost don't want to be home in a way because it's just so different, and it takes a long time for my mind at least, and I'm really comparing apples to oranges here.
No, it's fair.
But it takes like physically and mentally, it's not relaxing to come home, and it takes a long time to get back home.
Yeah.
But then if you only have 90 days, you know you're going back. Do you ever come down and really relax?
Not really.
Not really.
No. So even when you're off, I mean, you're still switched on, and you're going right into training.
Yeah.
You may get a week or two of like truly like don't come to work. Most team guys are pretty bad at abiding by that, especially earlier in your career when like that's where you want to be anyway.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
It's an odd transition. I can tell you when I got back after my first trip, just to give you an example, I get back to North Carolina after 9.5 months in Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
Get home, get into my truck. The first time I got into my vehicle to drive it, someone picked me up when I landed at the airport. I was driven home.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
The next day, I go to leave the house. I get in my truck and I'm just driving down the street. And someone in front of me was driving a little slow. And without even thinking about it, I'm in the left lane of oncoming traffic, driving past this person.
Yeah.
Totally normal. There was nothing unusual about that whatsoever. I do that like 4 or 5 times. Like, and I'm driving my truck like a lunatic.
Yeah.
At least a lunatic in America.
Sure.
Afghanistan, that's totally normal. But that had become just the way it was. I had to be like, what are you doing at one point? Like, you can't operate like this here, man.
Yeah.
You know, that's just a very like tactical example of that. But I would say even the greater challenge can be socially when you got, you know, family members and certainly when you got spouses and kids in the equation. Like for me, that came a little later into my career.
Yeah.
But socially, that can be a challenge.
100%. Yeah. How was the first deployment? Because you trained for a few years, but that's not going halfway around the world in a completely different environment for a long period of time.
Right.
Was it, I guess you said this is what I'm made to do.
Yeah.
Was it like, what were the emotions like your first deployment? Because you're probably learning faster than you've ever learned in your life.
Yeah. I'll tell you one of the first emotions. It's a bit of a blur now, but I've also taken quite a bit of shots to the head. But I can tell you that the first kind of emotion, or I guess maybe even character trait that became wildly obvious was humility. And that was even before we got into Afghanistan, my first trip. Like, you graduate the Q course, man. You got this green beret on your head. I was John Rambo. Right?
Yeah.
I was John Rambo. I was the baddest dude on the planet. It was like, just get me in the direction of the bad guys and I'm going to take care of it from here.
Sure.
That was the mentality. So ego, pretty arrogant, highly confident, if not cocky. That was me. Then you get to the teams and you realize that you barely know anything.
Yeah.
Like, the course gives you just a basic foundation to work off of. You learn how to do your job on the detachment from your teammates. That's it. So that was a punch to the face. Big, I'm strong. I know some cool skills. I can shoot accurately. All of these guys are better than you at all of the things.
Sure.
So humble pie, choke it down, stop paying attention, start asking questions, start learning. And then you get into the operational environment. I really didn't have much expectation of what that would look and feel like. But you hit the ground and things start happening really fast. So you're just drinking from a fire hose. And my like scope of clarity on what we were doing was like just past the end of my nose. And I had great teammates that they knew that. They're like, listen, go get that truck and drive it right over here. And that's it. Yeah. So like very like basic, simple guidance. And then over the course of the time that kind of extends and you start to kind of get a rhythm and get your bearings. And it's crazy how fast just about anything can become normal with enough repetition and exposure.
It is amazing how malleable the human body and mind is.
Right.
That you can just become accustomed to some of the worst stuff out there, but it just becomes your reality. It is funny too. I've heard other guys talk about this, like in the SEAL scenario, they become a SEAL, you make it through the training, and then you realize everybody's also made it through the training.
Yeah. Exactly.
So that's the bare minimum to get in the room.
Bare minimum.
So it's nothing.
Right.
Which is funny to think about.
Yeah. They've done that and then all of this other stuff.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you're like, I guess I'm not as badass of a guy as I thought I was. Okay, roger that.
In the U.S. Army toolbox, they have a lot of tools to do a bunch of stuff. How do they apply the Green Berets? Like what is the mission for the Green Berets? What is the task at hand in like a big picture sense?
Yeah. So we do have a variety of core tasks, i.e. mission sets. The primary one of those is unconventional warfare. Uh-huh. That's the overarching umbrella in which all of the other tasks that we are tasked to do kind of operate within. And there are really two words within the definition of unconventional warfare that really answers the question, and it's with and through. Green Berets are purpose-built to work with and through indigenous personnel or locals, others.
I see.
We are also referred to as force multipliers, meaning you can take a 12-man group of Americans, put them anywhere, and we will go find, recruit, train, develop, lead a much larger fighting force into combat.
Yeah.
That's what we do. We have a lot of phenomenal special ops units throughout the DoD that do really amazing things unilaterally, meaning just themselves. So the 15 group of dudes right here, they train together, they work together, they eat together. They're going to get in a helicopter, get flown somewhere, go do something, just them, and come back, and that's mission success.
Sure.
A lot of units that do that.
Yeah.
We're designed to work bilaterally, meaning with others. So I highlight that to kind of bring back the intelligence aspect of it, because you're operating in the realm of the human dynamic.
Yeah.
It's influence.
Yeah.
We have to be warriors and tacticians and be able to shoot, move, and communicate as a single entity. But we also have to be able to teach, advise, influence, and lead others.
Yeah. Not everything's solved with a gun.
And also not everything is solved with a gun.
Yeah, yeah.
So we're in the relationship business. Uh-huh. So, you send Green Berets someplace if you're trying to expand the amount of much manpower you need to do something while keeping the American footprint relatively small.
Sure. And correct me if I'm wrong, but weren't Green Berets some of the first American forces in Afghanistan, operating in Afghanistan?
We were the first DoD element on the ground in Afghanistan post 9/11.
In an official capacity in a way.
Yep.
Yeah. For that reason.
Correct. And kind of the irony of it, and so ODA 595, if you've seen the movie 12 Strong.
No, I have not.
Yeah. It's based off of the first team into Afghanistan, ODA 595. ODA 595 is actually the last team that I just came off of. Right. My last detachment time was the same team. So our team room is like a history book with all their stuff all over it. It's pretty cool to see what these guys had done. That's a phenomenal example of the utility of a special forces detachment.
Okay.
You take that group, you link up with some type of partner force element, and you now have a fighting force of hundreds of assets that you then direct and wield towards whatever the adversary is.
So on your deployments, you're not hanging out on base, getting in the Humvees, driving around, coming back to base. You're out there for sometimes longer periods of time in very remote settings on your own.
Every deployment's different, man. I would say that there are scenarios where an ODA or Special Forces detachment would be operating out of a bigger base.
Or traditional, yeah.
That can happen.
Yeah.
Usually we'd have kind of like an isolated area to do what we were doing outside of the rest of the people that would be there. More often than not, though, we're not operating out of a location like that. We're kind of set out. Yeah.
How was it culturally? Had you spent much time out of the United States before this?
Not really.
So you go to somewhere like Afghanistan, which culturally is a lot different than Boston.
Oh yeah.
So how was that? How was understanding the culture? Because if you don't do that, you're not effective in a lot of ways.
Correct. It's a good point.
So what was that like?
Challenging.
Yeah.
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 I mentioned humility, and that's an important component because you come in with all the tools, all the training, the expensive weapons and all the armor and the expensive Gucci equipment. And like, I know everything. Your job is to listen to me and do what I say.
Sure.
You will fail in this business.
Yeah.
That's your mentality.
Yeah.
You will be ineffective at influencing anybody. It is our responsibility to understand the culture and the dynamics and the cultural dynamic of where we're going into, because you need to know your target audience to know how to influence them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where a lot of the unsexy work of a Green Beret comes in prior to going on target or going into that environment. It's you're studying, you're reading, you're in language school. I mean, it's not all shooting bullets and blowing things up and driving fast and bench pressing. I mean, like those are things we do, but like it's the nerd shit. It's the nerd shit. But that's typically what differentiates success versus failure is how much you invest in the understanding of that operational environment and how you can go into it to influence it.
Yeah, it was, I had an opportunity in 2019. I was very much just in America my whole life. And then I had an opportunity in 2019 to go to Saudi Arabia for the first time. I've been there 3 times total. I'll go for a 4th this December. So it was my first time. Well, I went to China before that. That was a very different culture. But this was, going to the Middle East was quite interesting to me because it was somewhere that has this reputation in America. There's this, I tell people I'm going to the Middle East, like, oh, you better get your life insurance squared away, this and that. Yeah. Right. And you go there and you're like, I feel safer here than I do in Los Angeles. Like, what's going on here? And it was cool to be so immersed in this culture. And what was so cool about it was that everybody was on the same operating system, which I really, really appreciated and respected. Like it was a road construction project and there were a bunch of bulldozers and it was awesome. I was just absolutely in love, drooling over this. And the whole place stops. And these guys, they get out their prayer rugs, they roll them out right in the corner, right in the dirt, right next to the bulldozers, and they start praying right there. And it was just, it was incredible because that's not something you would see in America. Like we all believe in the same thing. We're all doing the same thing here. We're all aligned in a sense from a religious standpoint. And I thought that was very, very eye-opening to me. But what was most eye-opening, or what has been when I've gone where I have been, which is still somewhat limited compared to a lot of people, is that they were completely different. They believed in completely different things, grew up in a completely different place. We have no common words with one another, but they're still, they still appreciate humor. They still want to take care of their families. They still don't like people telling them what to do. Like there's these human traits that you can be halfway around the world, and it sounds obvious, but it's like one of my favorite things is laughing with somebody else who's completely different than me. We don't speak the same language, but we understand something is funny, and it's just like, wow, we're both human beings.
There it is.
This is extraordinary.
No.
And I think that was a long way of saying I have really come to appreciate traveling to different places because you appreciate the humanity, I think, a lot more.
Yeah. It's true. I get that kind of question or dialogue quite a bit is, what's it like over there and how's it different? And it's different in so many ways. But you said it, at the end of the day, you're talking about people, and in some of the environments that we have been in the past and some places we're in now, some of the people are in a really challenging predicament where there's an organization or group that's not so great. And that's probably one of the reasons why we're there.
Sure. And
then we show up and we want the assistance from the locals and we're trying to work with them. And they're like, well, what do we do here? Because you're not going to be here forever. These guys will be. What are we doing? You have to like appreciate that for one. And then I think to your point, it helps to just recognize that you're talking about human beings.
Yeah.
Like you refer to your God as something different than me. Your ideology is different. The foods you enjoy are different. Your day-to-day routines are different, but you're also a human and you want to take care of your family. You want to provide and like all these things. And like those like foundational themes is oftentimes all you may have to go off of
Yeah.
to begin kind of pulling on
Sure.
to develop that from like a basic humanitarian perspective. But if you go into it with its, you're different, so I don't like you because what I do is right and what you do is wrong, like forget about it. You're not going to succeed in the relationship business if that's the degree of which you can see. You have to see it past that.
Well, and I think the American mindset too, we fall victim sometimes, big picture, to we know best. And I think it's important to understand their situation. Like, yeah, I at face value, why would they be working with this group, with this reputation? But then you take it like 1 degree further than that. Oh, I can kind of understand because they live there. They're paying for everything, or they've done X, Y, Z. Their family's depending on it. Something along those lines. Like, it doesn't take very much to understand where people are coming from and why they're doing things.
Right.
But even just with stuff going on today, you just see people's opinions on stuff. And you're like,
Sure.
Why don't you just take one moment to ask yourself, if you were in that position, what would you be doing? Because you'd probably be doing the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, perspective is a powerful tool.
Yeah.
We all have different degrees of that. And to use this as an example, sometimes I'm asked like, hey man, like I see the comments and people's opinions on stuff. Like, does this not bother you as a service member? Like you're willing to like die for this society, and people can be so ignorant and clueless and short-sighted, all these things. And the way that I've decided to kind of approach that, whether I'm looking at some kind of display at a university that I don't agree with,
Sure.
right? That may trigger like an emotional reaction of me in something, as an example. It's like, well, in order to behave that way, in order to have that vantage point or position, you have to have lived in this isolated bubble.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because if you knew what you were supporting or you knew what your opinion was rooted in, it's incredibly unlikely that you would still maintain that.
Sure.
So you don't have the perspective of that because you never lived it, you never seen it, you never experienced it. You get a slice from whatever conduit and you form this entire position off that, and then you like display that in whatever form. The lack of perspective is what has enabled you to do this thing.
Yeah.
You're setting a flag on fire, or you're like throwing rocks at something, whatever the thing is. Lack of perspective is what is allowing this to happen. Well, that lack of perspective, which can lead to maybe the word ignorance, is a direct result of what I do for a living.
Sure.
Me and millions of others have created this insulated bubble known as the United States of America that allows the society members to be that clueless.
Yes.
Without us, the real world is going to be at your front door like that. And that's just the objective truth.
Sure.
So what I'm seeing right now, it may bother me in a way. Is it also not an indicator that me and my friends are doing our job at least like decently enough to allow this to happen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if you let that bother you, you'd probably just hate everybody all the time.
Yeah. And how productive is that? Really?
You'd just be so angry.
Right.
But you can, in a way, put yourself in their position too. Like, wow, if I lived in that bubble, like you could argue both sides, but if I lived in that bubble, I might think like that as well. Like you can see how they're at that.
Sure.
Because they just haven't experienced it can be very bubbly in the United States, I've realized.
100%.
Very bubbly.
Mm-hmm.
Was it interesting, or has it been interesting being involved in what you have? Because another thing traveling has shown me is that the story on TV is sometimes very different than reality. Has it been interesting? And it took me a while to figure that out. Like post 2020 is when I started to figure that out. Like, wait a minute, there's some inconsistencies here. Was it interesting being involved in some of these things that are on TV? Was it sometimes quite different than the reality?
Yeah.
How do you reconcile that? It just is what it is.
It becomes normal, right?
Yeah.
It becomes normal. I can tell you something that's like to visualize an example of that is if we are in an environment in which I am accessing raw material in some kind of compartmented system. Like, this is what just happened.
Yeah.
At event X.
Sure.
Cool. And it's completely untouched, ground truth, multi-source verified, for sure. The general public will never know that, like, as that story unfolded for real.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, let's say I've got Fox News on one television, I've got CNN on another television,
Yeah.
I've got BBC on another one. I'm reading the thing of what actually happened, and I'm concurrently watching or listening to 3 entirely separate examples of the same event. I've been in that exact scenario. I don't know how many times at this point.
I'm
and
sure.
It's one where you just kind of laugh, maybe roll your eyes, but you get used to it. It's like, this is the nature of the information flow and the 24-hour news cycle. And I get it. And it's like, okay.
Well, it's just interesting in your position. Yeah. Being at the center of some of those things, really, you're one of the people that knows the truth, but it just, like, you can probably see it more clear than most people, I would say.
Sure.
So to, I guess, get back to, I guess, one of the things you started, what put you on the speaking circuit to begin with? Your third deployment, you say you're in some kind of accident that changes everything.
Yep.
It's fair to say.
Yep.
Was it, well, I guess, do you talk about that story probably a million times over?
Yeah.
What happened then?
So, I mean, the short version is, prior to going out on operation, a member of the Afghan National Police Force that we've been working with climbed up on the back of a pickup truck and unloaded a belt-fed machine gun into me and my teammates from about 25 feet away.
Wow.
12 U.S. casualties total, 3 of which killed, myself, another 8, varying degrees of wounded. And the result for me was the amputation of my right leg above the knee.
Wow.
So, spent a year at Walter Reed, going through, I had about like 40 surgeries on my right leg as they were battling the infection, and they were just like incrementally amputating it piece by piece over the course of about 6 or 7 weeks.
Really?
And then began just my basic kind of rehabilitation, working with a physical therapist, prosthetist, figuring out how to just live life as a one-legged guy, and having my sights set on getting back to the team from the very beginning. Even when I was on ketamine and Dilaudid, and I'm in and out of surgery, my mission was very clear to me at that point. I would go back to doing what I do.
Really?
There was no doubt about it. Yeah, no clue. No doubt about it. Not a clue as to how I would do that, but I knew what I was going to do. Eventually get back to my unit, battled through the administrative process to stay on active duty. I mean, the Army really did their best to force me into civilian life. So found myself in an 8-month administrative street fight with the Army to stay on active duty. During that time, I was working as an instructor. Win the battle to stay on active duty, cool. And now what do I got to do to get back onto the team? And although there had never been an above-the-knee amputee to go back to a special forces detachment, they gave me the chance to demonstrate my ability to do it. And I mean, they just ran me through the ringer. And eventually, after I'd passed enough assessments, they put me back on the team. I was back in Afghanistan like 6 months later.
6 months later?
No, more like 6 weeks later after I got back to the team. Yeah. So from the time that I was wounded to the time I was back in Afghanistan, it was like 2 years.
Wow.
A year at Walter Reed, and then a year of administrative battle, recertification, revalidation, back to the team.
And so when that happened, was it immediate? Like you said, I'm just going to get back there? That was the mission for the 2 years?
From the beginning, yeah.
Why was that, do you think?
The short way I can answer that is, at that time, and things have changed for me since, but at that time, it was almost 12 years ago.
Yeah.
Being a Green Beret and a professional warfighter on behalf of a society really wasn't so much what I did. It was who I was. Like,
Sure.
my entire identity was wrapped up in this one function.
Yeah.
I was put on this planet to do this one thing. So if that's the case, and if you believe that unequivocally, then you have 2 options. One is to roll over and die, and the other is to go back to doing what you were put on this earth to do.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. So it was like, I don't do very well with the whole rolling over and dying thing. So that's a non-option.
Imagine.
So this is it. And,
Yeah.
it's an easy decision to make. It becomes essentially impossible to make real in this example. But when we can answer the what am I going to do question, it allows us to redirect all of our energy and bandwidth into how am I going to do this, which is an entirely different question.
Sure.
And how often do we find ourselves in this what am I going to do cycle, whether it's after a bad day or a traumatic event or a shitty month? It's like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And it just doesn't stop.
Yeah.
Like you have to plant a flag at some point in the future and be like, that's what I'm going to go do.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing it may change.
Yeah.
You may make it, you may not. It's going to be really hard. In fact, it should be hard on the way, but like that's the thing. Cool. Now let's figure out how.
I've found too, people, they'll say, and I've thought a lot about this, that it's unhealthy to have your identity wrapped up in what you do. But I feel like to be at that level, it has to be the case in a lot of ways. Even I know it's not the healthiest, and there's probably other ways to do it. But I feel like to be at that level, there has to be some sort of overlap.
Yeah, it is. I don't want to say it's an unfortunate common theme, but it is a common theme. And extremely high performers.
Not just military.
No.
Just across the board.
I'm talking the household names and those that are not.
Mm-hmm.
Most are completely obsessed with their thing.
Yeah.
The Elon Musks, the Michael Jordans, like every ounce of them goes into this. And that's in many cases a requirement, to use your word, to make that real. I often am asked, and sometimes I play the what if game. If I had the wife and kids I have today, back then, would I have even still pursued it? And would I have been successful at it? Because those three humans are non-negotiables priorities in my life, period. There is no professional goal or personal achievement that I would sacrifice them to achieve. Doesn't exist. I barely made it back to the team. I barely made it back to doing what I got to do, continue more for years and years after the fact. That was with me going completely all in. Every minute of every day, literally, was invested in making that one thing real. And I barely made it. So just, it's theoretical, but it seems incredibly unlikely. Had I had the priorities I have today, back then, I don't think it would have played out that way.
How old are you?
I was 30 when I lost my leg.
30. So you were still single, just living the SF life.
My wife now, we knew each other then, but we didn't turn that into a thing until actually it was just after I was injured.
Wow.
But then we got married in 2016.
Okay. And
then not long after that, the boys came around. So
yeah,
it was a lot, obviously, easier for me to be like, this is, but I can tell you, it's a great story. Quick one. My wife, Tony, was in my life right up when I was injured. She was actually in Afghanistan. She's active duty military as well. So she was deployed as well. She had a front row seat to this whole thing. I mean, we were in two different sides of the country, but when I was wounded, I was brought to the location she was at. So literally front row seat of me where I should have died a couple times. And I spent a year at Walter Reed. I go back to North Carolina and I move in with her. At that point, we had kind of developed like, this is like a real thing. Okay, cool. I move in with her. I was maybe home for a couple weeks and I had been outlining my training regiment, like, because now I'm no longer in the hospital. I'm back at my unit. I've got all of our strength coaches and dietitians and cognitive sports psychs. I got all these assets that I'm going to extract as much value as I possibly can from all these individuals to make this goal real. So I've got my daily schedule dialed into the minute. It's like, I'm going to be asleep at this time. And boom, every ounce, every gram of protein. I mean, dialed in.
Really?
In my book, Objective Secure, there's an example of literally what a 24 hours looked like. Food I was eating, tasks I was doing. I mean, you pick that up and look at it, you're like, this dude's insane, which is fair because I was a little out of my mind to be fair. Yeah. So I've got this whole thing outlined and now it's time to like start executing. And I knew then that the future I have now with my wife and family was a thing. I could see it back then, right? 12 years ago. It's like, this is real. I know it's real. Soulmate, whatever the term, the white picket fence, the dogs, the kids. I can see the whole thing. I knew it. But I knew I had to commit entirely to this thing. And I sat her down and I'm living with her. And I was like, hey, like, here's just like an example of what my life is going to look like day to day. Here's a 24-hour block. Mm-hmm. What that means for us is there will be no dinners. There will be no trips. There's no weddings. Like, if someone dies, I'm not going to the funeral. Like, literally burning the boats and going all in on this. Mm-hmm. And I understand if you don't want to like be a part of this with me. This is kind of in like the typical courting phase of an early relationship, with all the cologne and the expensive like dinners and the flowers and shit. That's like what would normally be going on here. You're like putting on this like kind of facade version of yourself to try to close. Uh-huh. With me, it was like almost the complete other direction. And we're basically like, I want you along this with me, but like you're a secondary priority for me right now. And that's just the cold hard truth. And I get it if you don't want to maintain this. I went into that conversation basically like with a broken heart, anticipating her saying like, yeah, dude, like I'm not about that life. Mm-hmm. Like, good luck and we'll see you later. And that's not what she did. She was like, all right, cool. Like, let's do it. And she became not only a support system for me, but like a teammate. She was like right alongside me. We like tackled this thing together. So I was willing to sacrifice what I have now. Yeah. Then, had it already existed though, I don't think so, man.
I guess it is. I think that's a lot of it though. Just being honest about what you need to do and why you need to do it. I feel like that's a big thing to do. Because had you not said that and then did it anyway, that creates the problems, I feel like.
Yeah. Yeah. It does help, like being open, honest up front.
Go figure. Yeah.
You know, I know. It's a wild concept.
I'm still figuring that out, man. Right. I'm still unmarried and it doesn't seem like it's getting any closer. So to get back in, do you basically have to prove I can do everything I could do with 2 legs? That was the test, essentially.
It ended up being about 12, 13 weeks of time. And I would do usually anywhere from 2 to 4 different assessments a week. Wow. So, I mean, they unloaded the kitchen sink at me. They, in fact, were making things up that weren't like standardized Army or even special ops training events. Yeah. They were making new things up for me to do. It's a funny story because it really began kind of like, I mean, my leaders were great humans, and they wanted to support me, but this is a business and there's a standard and that's it. Sure. So they were like, okay, Nick, go do just like a basic Army physical fitness test. The same one that every soldier has to do at least once a year. Yeah. Go do that. I went and did it, came back. They were like, oh, well, we weren't really expecting you to like pass that one. Cool, go do this one. Yeah. Nothing outside the box, nothing creative, standard Army, standard training events. I do the second one. I do the third one. It was right around the time that I completed like the 4th physical assessment that they had me do, that all of our senior leaders sat down in this big conference room. There was like 12 of them in the room, including the colonel, who's the commander of the unit. Yeah. And they were like, all right, Nick is not going away. Okay. We all kind of figured we'd give him 1 or 2 of these things. He would fail at it. And then we could find him a place to exist with a little more practicality. Yeah, yeah. This fucking dude's not going away.
Let him arrive at that conclusion.
Yeah, we're going to give him the opportunity, but this is how it's going to play out. Sure. Because one-legged guys don't do these things. So they sit down and they're like, okay, we have to come up with like an actual game plan here. We can't just like be throwing random shit at this dude. What do we actually need him to be able to demonstrate? If we were to even consider putting him back on a team, what will we need him to do? Little yellow sticky notes come out, literally, and they just start throwing shit on a wall. This.
They'd never been in this position before.
No. So
they had to really create it.
They created it. Wow. A lot of that was physical, but it was a lot of proficiency evaluations, like to my specific job, cognitive assessments, psychological screenings. I really did their diligence. And, like rightfully so. They were about to take an enormous risk. A whole bunch of commanders
Sure.
We're about to assume a pretty enormous risk,
Yeah.
putting a one-legged guy back on a team that's going back into Afghanistan to conduct direct action counterterrorism operations. Yeah, let's make sure with as much certainty as we can that he can do it. And that's what they did.
How is the cognitive side? Because the physical side, yes, you have one leg. Did it affect you? How did it affect you cognitively, if at all?
I would say it affected me cognitively primarily because I was grasping at any element of my human capability to enhance, to try to make up for what I was going to lose physically. We had sports psychs as assets in the groups before I was injured.
Yeah.
It was like a whatever to me. Like just a resource that I never took advantage of.
I see.
I never took it seriously. Like I can move fast. I can move all the weight. I can shoot accurately. Like I don't need you.
Like sports psychologists that you can access.
Yeah.
For the SF guys to get better.
100%.
Okay.
Yep. They can work with you as an individual. They can work with you with your team. They can work into different training scenarios.
But you're like, no, I'm good.
I'm good. I don't need any of that stuff.
Sure.
I can shoot, move, communicate. I'm fast. I'm a physical specimen. I do jujitsu. Like that was my mentality. I don't need you. Thanks, but no, that's not for me. When I get back to the unit, it's like, what are all the tools I have here at my disposal? And that guy was one of them. And I met with him within the first couple of days of me being back after I got out of the hospital. And I was like, hey, man, what do you got for me? Now I'm listening.
Sure.
Right? Because I'm not physically capable of doing the things that I was able to do 12 months ago. What do you bring to this table? And so I started training with him and just doing different like cognitive development stuff because it helped increase what I could do physically.
What did he bring to the table? What was that like?
The ability to focus in when you've got a plethora of tasks that have to happen within a given scenario.
Yeah.
The brain muscle connection, speeding those response times up.
Interesting.
Awareness of your operational environment down to like the tic-tac detail of the ground, the terrain. So really an increased sense of focus and also an increased sense of training neural pathways to be able to control stress.
Okay.
Right? Through like breathing techniques and other training repetitions that can help you lower your heart rate, calm your nerves, regain focus, because I'm outputting more energy to do anything than you. Like to give you an example, for you and I to walk down this hallway right now,
yeah,
it requires around 70% more energy for me to do that than you as a
Really?
single above the knee amputee.
Really?
So to put that in an energy perspective, in terms of like ATP investment, like energy of the body, would be equivalent to you doing like a light jog. For me to walk, it would be you jogging from an energy expenditure perspective.
And I can focus a little bit better walking than I can jogging.
Right, because you have a lower heart rate.
Yeah, my body's not
moving as fast.
putting as much into
exactly.
moving. Yeah.
So like cognitive sports psychs can help you regulate that.
I had no idea.
So you can make cleaner, more objective, more logical decisions under fatigue faster. That makes sense?
Yeah.
So they're an incredible asset. There's a reason why every major professional sports organization in the country has these guys on their teams because it absolutely works. So from a cognitive perspective, I began relying on that to increase what I could do as a kind of a whole of a man approach performance.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Have you had to go through different legs?
Oh my gosh.
I'm just asking random questions.
Hundreds.
I haven't been able to talk to somebody that's an amputee. So yeah, so you've like that's probably part of the process too.
It is.
You don't just like, oh yeah, here's your leg.
No.
This is it, and then your problem solved.
No, especially not when you're doing wild off the wall shit.
Yeah, there's like a technical component here too.
Yeah.
Beyond physical.
Correct.
But were you supported the whole way by the U.S. military? Because it's also probably pretty expensive.
Oh, it's incredibly expensive.
Yeah.
And yes, with me being on active duty, it still technically funnels through our insurance provider as soldiers.
Okay.
But because I'm active duty, I have essentially a blank check. It's like whatever you need to do your job.
So did you have to? You're probably involved in like the developmental process of that though. Like how do you, like what's that process like? You know, you try this out.
Yeah.
Do you provide feedback? Like, oh, I liked this, I didn't like this, and you work with somebody to...
So with me, that did happen. Yeah. That's not the norm.
No, yes.
Right. But in the beginning, I tried a whole bunch of different components. They're just throwing different things at you. You get one that feels somewhat decent. The whole experience is new as hell. So it's like, I don't know. I got nothing to compare this to.
Yeah.
This seems like it'll work. Okay, cool. Reps. Try something new. No, like, oh, that could be an option. You're playing around with like just basic day-to-day tasks. Like I got to get up and go to the grocery store. Like that's it. And then from there, it's I need to run. I need to rock climb. I need to swim. I need to jump out of planes. I need to move uphill or down or on a bicycle. Like all like specific components for like a specific task all happens over time. From a development perspective though, like the knee that I'm wearing right now is possibly and most likely the most advanced knee that's really on the market.
Sure.
It's got a microprocessor. It's got a little computer in it.
Wow.
The knee alone is like $90,000.
That's crazy. Huh.
The company that makes it, Autobach, after my first deployment, this thing is supposed to be indestructible. It's got like a weight max of like 6 tons or something insane. Like this thing is built for military personnel. That's literally why they built it. Wow. In fact, it's unusual for a non-U.S. military service member to get this knee. There's like a civilian version that this one was kind of built off of, but this thing was beefed up to be indestructible. It can do anything. Waterproof, you can run on it, beat the hell out of it. My first deployment as an amputee, I broke 5 of these over a 6-month deployment. So basically 1 a month I was destroying. And I got back and I sent them all back to the manufacturer. And I get a phone call like a month later that was routed through my prosthetist at Walter Reed because that was their point of contact. He chimes me in on a 3-way call and it was their head developer at the company. They're like head R&D guy. And he's like, hey man, I'm looking at the reports from the knees that we're refurbishing, the ones that we can salvage. And one of this is the most catastrophically broken knee we've ever seen. And at first I was like, these guys are going to stop giving me the knee. Like I was panic stricken for a second. I need that knee. And these guys are going to be like, fuck you. Like we're not giving you any more of our thing because it's a $90,000 thing and you're like breaking them every like 2 weeks. But it was the complete opposite. He's like, what is it you're doing on this thing? How can we make it better?
Yeah. How did you break it like that?
A lot of it stemmed from the terrain and the dust and the sand and the type of dirt that was like getting in through the filter system. And it was getting in, it was like gumming up a lot of the interior components and it was frying out the computer. That was what was generally happening most of the time. So because of that, they then refurbished how the inner components worked. So like what I'm wearing right now is literally was created because of me taking it out there and doing some of this insane stuff and then them getting that broken version of what I had just done to their product and being like, oh, how do we make it better?
Yeah. That's probably some of the best data they could get.
Oh yeah. They love it.
Yeah.
The same thing happened I deployed the next year. I was in Somalia, similar environment, and I broke 6 of them.
Wow. That's crazy.
They were like,
that's the kind of stuff you don't think about.
Right. So there is a technical and kind of resource perspective to this as well.
Sure.
Like to keep me upright and moving, I need like components. Sometimes I need wrenches. I need additional screws. I need spare parts.
Yeah. Have you had to learn, like they don't just give it to you like, all right, good luck. Have you had to learn how all of that functions? Because if you're out in Somalia, you can't call up the engineer.
That's on you.
Yeah. If you don't figure that out, you're out there. So you probably have to understand it as good as anybody.
Yeah. And I'll tell you where most of that knowledge comes from. It's by a bad day happening or a bad event happening where something breaks, regardless of where I am. And you're like, I either don't have what I need to fix this or I don't know how to fix this. So I got to figure that. I got to get through this little inconvenience now. And then add to my kit equipment that I'm going to need to solve this problem the next time it happens. And or learn what is going on so that I can figure out how to fix it the next time this happens.
But the motivation that you have, like the chip on your shoulder that is, I'm not going to let anybody else down here that probably helps you overcome just about anything.
That's a powerful drive.
I bet.
Yeah.
I bet it's a powerful drive.
That's a powerful drive. I'll give you an example of it is when I was first working to get back to the teams, it was basically entirely about me. Getting back to doing what I love, proving the naysayers wrong, proving myself right, kind of like those cliche things.
Sure.
This visualization of getting off of the plane back in Afghanistan with both arms in the air. Like, I made it. I'm back. Like, you done messed up, right? You should have killed me when you had the chance, and now you're going to pay. That's what got me through the first, like, year and a half of a lot of really hot times.
Yeah.
And it was actually, I was in the process of going through my revalidation to get back to the teams. And I got momentum, and I'm feeling good. I'm knocking things out, boom, boom, boom. And I pop up in the middle of the night. It was like 2:00 in the morning, and I thought I was dying. Like, my heart was out of control. My now wife was next to me, and she's like, "What's going on? Do I call 911?" I'm like, "Hold, just give me a second." And it hit me that I was going back to a team with 11 other guys on it who have families, and the first thought of being a liability to them really hit me, and I hadn't thought about that at all, which is kind of ironic because I was with these guys like on a daily basis. We're in the gym together. We're training together. I'm working as an instructor and they're still on the detachment, but like it's a very small world.
Sure.
So we're physically around each other most days. I just hadn't looked at it through that lens, and it scared the hell out of me for one. And then I felt like just a giant piece of shit for having not thought about them before. So I go into work the next morning and I go to their team room and I ask for their time. And they, of course, were like, "What's up, man?" I'm like, "Dude, I first need to apologize. I feel horrible." And they're like, "What? Okay, well, what's up?" And I tell them. And they're like, "Okay, well, first off, it's all good. Second of all, we've already talked about this multiple times. And the truth is, dude, as much as we love you, like, we don't know if this is going to work. But if you are able to make it back here, we're going to be the first to tell you whether or not you're going to stay here." And it entirely reframed my perspective particularly when I was going into, my third training session of the day, when I'm exhausted and all of the excuses to take this off or go at 50% are all sounding the most convincing when you're beaten down and your true character comes to the surface. Rather than me thinking about getting off the plane with my arms over my head, I was thinking about my teammate's 5-year-old son. It was like, you need to do this work now, not for you, but for that kid. And that took what was already a pretty out of control operating level and just threw gasoline on it. Sure. It was on a whole nother dimension.
Yeah. Have you deployed more with an amputation than before?
Yes.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So now is it probably just matter of fact?
It's the new normal.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what I used to ask this question when I was at the hospital with guys that had been amputees much longer than me was that almost like, when does this become normal?
Sure.
And there's no like defined answer, but what one dude told me was, when you start dreaming as yourself as a one-legged guy, that's like a indicator that it's normal for you. And that's always stuck with me.
Yeah.
I haven't got to that point yet.
Yeah.
So I'm still a two-legged guy when I call a dream that I have most of the time. But yeah, this is the way it is. Yeah.
How has taking this in a totally different direction? You're in a career that is demanding, to say the least. So you're still in the military, active duty. You're speaking and doing PR related stuff in the military. You're doing that outside of the military. And then you've got a family and young kids.
Yeah.
Young kids.
Yeah.
How do you figure all that out? Like, that's a very complex problem.
Yeah.
It's one thing when it's just you, but now there's a lot more going on.
Yeah. It's
I guess your spouse is military, so there's some understanding there.
That goes a long way.
Sure.
It's a double-edged sword, like most things tend to be. Because she gets it. We speak the language.
Yeah. When
I come home and I'm like, hey, this is what's going on. She knows what that means. We both have clearances, so we can talk like business. So there's upsides to that. The downside is just the operational tempo of our lives. Like, sometimes we're high-fiving I just got home from a 4-month trip and she's out the door for 6 months and we're just like handing off the kids and it's like on to the next thing, or we're both gone at the same time. But that's a huge component of at least my particular circumstance. I get this question quite often. I don't want this to sound rehearsed, but it's, how do you like balance these things? I love the way you framed it because it is a complex problem. And one of the things that me and my company we teach leadership and team building. It's, well, what do you need to solve complex problems? And the answer is you need simple solutions. Some, when I ask that question, will say like complex solutions. Like, no, like it's got to be very simple.
Yeah.
Like incredibly simple to make this understandable and then doable. That really is the answer. I'll tell you. I think the most concise way that I've determined to answer this at this point is I don't do anything else. I don't do anything else. Here's another one of these conversations where as I evolve this, people start to feel bad about themselves and then may like redirect that and go on the offensive towards me as if I'm attacking somebody. This is one of those examples. Be prepared. Okay. I preface that this is out of love and respect for you. Anyone listening and watching, man, like I don't know you.
No, I love football. Like don't
exactly. Or golf or fishing or like, listen, like that's what we're talking about. And we can rationalize and justify why we invest time and energy or money into a certain thing, that it's in our best interest. I need to play 18 holes every Saturday because that's my mental wellness approach to longevity.
Yeah.
It's easy to believe that.
Yeah.
And I'm not suggesting that doesn't have that effect. What I am saying is that you got 24 hours to work with, regardless of your responsibilities and priorities and obligations, all these things. We decide how we use them. I have a family. I have young kids. I have 2 professions. I get responsibility, right? I'm not immune to that. But the more things you have that you're committed to, it's a simple math equation. You got 24. Like, what are you going to do with it? You got 7 days. What are you going to do with them? So that's really it. And that to some may sound like I live a unfulfilling, monotonous. It can be a monotonous life, but I love it. And I don't really want to do anything else aside from that.
Yeah. I, like a few hours ago was asked on some interview deal that like, what do you do beyond work? And I struggle with that question. I feel like I have to make up something else. And I did make up something else. I said, well, I have an aquarium and I do a bunch of running too. But like, I don't even really get into it because it's like, it's just not worth it. But this is it. Right. This is all I do. Right. I don't know what else you're looking for here because, and I struggle to explain it to people that live normal lives. And sometimes I'm a little envious. Like sometimes I wish I could just sit on the couch and enjoy the football game, but that's just not the program I'm on.
Right.
And I feel like I have to manufacture an answer that is more average in a way, but the real answer is no, I'm just absolutely fucking obsessed.
That's it.
and I don't know how else to explain that. And if you're not obsessed, you're not going to understand it. And but that's okay. Like it's not worse or better. It's just different.
Different. And I love that word. The way you just said that is brilliant. I also tend to warn, which goes unheard in one ear out the other. Our clients or members and friends, it's like, be careful what you wish for. Okay. Sure. Like you've got this ambition to do whatever the thing is, start a business, write a book, play in the NFL, become a Green Beret, start a podcast, whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
Good. But if you're living this gift of life without a large ambition, what the fuck are we doing here?
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing? So good. Have that. This kind of focus and drive and obsession, that again is a pretty common theme amongst those that make it, whatever that means to you. It comes with some costs. Okay. It comes with some costs. I'd say most significantly socially.
Yeah.
Whether you're on the dating scene or you have a spouse or kids, like whatever the dynamic is, you can slowly learn to adopt this kind of drive and determination and disciplined behavior to get much more operational with how you spend your minutes. That's a learned skill.
Yeah.
Okay. The flip side to that is once that becomes the new normal for you, one, you're going to have less people that get it, which you just talked about, right? And it's not better, worse, it's different. So you're in a more different group because few have that operating system.
Yeah.
When that difference is within people that you care about and care about you, that's where it can get really challenging.
Oh yeah.
When to use your example, like I wish I could sit on the couch and watch football. That might be cool to do, but like it's really hard for me to do.
Yeah,
because I'm thinking about work.
Not my cards. Yeah,
like I got all these projects and these initiatives, and I want to make this better, and blah blah blah. Like it's not to turn that off can be hard when, and I'll use myself as an example. When I'm at home and with my family, with my favorite people on this planet. And my brain is somewhere else. I'm thinking about business. I'm thinking about work. I'm thinking about like the emails that I know are stacking up, and I really want to invest some time into this thing.
Yeah.
It's a challenging place to be because it also comes with some guilt. Like I should want to be here more, but I do want to be with these people. I love these people. Yeah. So like gain control of that switch is a whole different skill in itself. To have that degree of focus and emotional regulation where you can be like, no, this matters now. Work will be there later. I have to want this and I need to invest in this now.
To that note, I heard a comedian, I think it was Jimmy Carr, talking about it, and he framed it in a really odd way. He's like, there's nothing more intoxicating than being on stage in front of thousands of people. And then I come home and it's like, it's less cool.
Yeah.
And I completely understood, like, to someone that probably comes off like, what an asshole, but I completely understood what he was saying. And to like the life you live outside of family world is probably pretty damn cool.
It's cool.
Like the people you're involved in, your job, the speaking, like all of that's probably just crazy.
Life as a Green Beret is really cool. You're around really different people doing really different things.
Yeah.
Life as an entrepreneur is wildly different. And like the things you're doing, cultivating something from nothing with cool people that you choose to be around. Yeah. They're both cool.
Yeah. And then you're at the birthday party.
And then you're at the birthday party. And it's like, roger that. We're going to do this.
Yeah. But it's like, but mentally, I bet it's easier said than done to just be present.
It is.
Or just to take it in, or just talk to the dad, the other dad, that real estate agent. You're like, oh wow, yeah. How many houses did you sell this month? Like, because you can't really relate, but
it's tough.
But yeah, it's tough. Yeah.
It's tough. And I want to emphasize, you already said it's not this like condescending, I'm better than you. That's genuinely not the position. Yeah. People may think that hearing this now, like you think you're better than me and fuck you. It's like just because I'm not a Green Beret. It's like that's not it. It's so unique.
Sure.
That causes a kind of a dichotomy that makes it difficult to relate and be present. Where I mess things up most frequently is when it comes to the intentionality, mindfulness with my wife and kids. I know that. And it's something that it's constantly being worked on. I will never be as good at that as I want to be. You have to be consistent with it and approach that with the same type of tenacity that you do with your professional life as within your personal life. You got to live it. And, that takes the same degree of discipline and focus and execution and consistency and all these things that have enabled us to do the things we're doing now, redirected down and in.
Yeah.
Because at least for me, it's like there is no summit for me to get to if in the process these three people aren't with me for the climb.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
There was a point when that was the case.
I've been there.
Right.
I've been there the past decade.
Yeah.
And I've had zero relationships that have worked out as a result.
Yeah.
Go figure. Because I've been so fixated on one thing, but I'm 29 going on 30 in February. And it's like I feel like a lot of people go into 30 with apprehension and regret, which I find quite interesting. Like, oh yeah, I'm turning 30. I'm stoked. I did my 20s. I could not have fit more into my 20s.
Yeah.
But I'm also asking, all right, cool. This is a life milestone. So what do I want now in my 30s? And now I'm thinking bigger picture, family, so on and so forth. And now I'm thinking, okay, you've got to put effort into that. Like you've gotten here's the results you've gotten, and it's fine. I'm glad it's worked out this way. Because you've had all of your effort over here. So what happens if you work just as hard on this, or take some of that effort and put it into this?
Right.
Like it's like these other things, like your fitness, like your professional life. And now I'm like, well, yeah, you dummy. Like, of course you have to work hard on it, but it took me to get to almost 30 to figure that out.
Right. Like the hard truth is, using that example, is very few people are actually 100% in on something.
Yeah.
It's easy to like think that genuinely, or more easy to bullshit yourself that you are.
Yeah. Very
few people are actually there. So it's like, if I'm going to bring in this new thing, that means I have to take some away. In your case, it would be the case. With me earlier in my career, like, no, that literally was it. And I have to reinvest elsewhere. But most, it's like what needs to go is the fluff.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the investment on your work, for example, can stay exactly what it is now. You don't need to give any of that up to invest in your kids or your spouse or your side hustle or your passion or your whatever. It's the white space fluff that's not producing much ROI. That's where you need to start making some sacrifices to reinvest. And that can be hard because it's where we get our fulfillment or our dopamine or our joy. And I like golfing. I like it's these things. So I use sleep as a similar analogy, where it's this idea that I need to be sacrificing sleep to be creating more effects. It's like, well, sleep is something that we've been proven as humans that is a non-negotiable. The duration is one thing and the quality is something else, but sleep is not going away, unfortunate as it may be. Because you're like, it's like 6, 8, 10 hours, man. Like I could be doing a lot.
So inefficient.
Unfortunate, so inefficient. Before you look at cutting back sleep, meaning you were getting up at 5 and now it's going to be 4, prior to that, are you actually squeezing as much ROI out of the time you're awake already? Look there first, because there's definitely space where you can get the same amount of rest, move this and move this. Once that's maxed out, okay, which probably won't happen, but let's say it does. Now maybe we start looking at shaving off 30, 45 minutes here, getting up a little earlier than before.
Yeah, I'm going to have to give up cat memes. Just no more cat memes.
Right.
Yeah, you go to cost too, and it's easy to go down a path, especially when you're, at least I got into business and young and hungry, and you hear all the guys saying, there's going to be a cost. And you're like, yeah, I'll pay anything. And then some of the stuff starts coming, like for you, you lose your leg, for example.
Yeah. That's
probably something you didn't expect. That probably wasn't on your bingo card.
Was not.
One thing that wasn't on mine, my father hasn't spoken to me in 2.5 years.
Wow.
We had never had a problem with our relationship. Start the business, start to have problems.
Interesting.
And it's been a big struggle.
That's tough.
It's been super tough. And I am willing, I'm at this point, like he's in his 70s, I'm willing to eat as much humble pie as possible for the opportunity to talk to him, but he's not at all.
Wow.
Not at all.
I'm sorry to hear that.
And I don't talk about it too much, because it's like, I'm not talking about it to, get hugs and so on and so forth, but it's a cost that I would have never put down on paper. Like what's the worst thing that can happen to you to do this? What are you willing to really give up? Your father? Like, no, that's crazy. And here I am. And it's, it's just, that's the kind of stuff that you can't really prepare yourself for.
Yeah.
But, and I talk to people like, this has probably been the greatest cost I've had to pay thus far. And they're like, well, that, I wouldn't be willing to do that. And it's like, yeah, I wasn't willing to do that either, but here I am. And I can't, I struggle to explain to you, like, I have to do this.
Yeah.
I fucking have to do this.
Yeah.
And so it's not okay. And I didn't want it, but I have to do this. And I don't know how to put that into words for somebody, because it only makes sense to me, I guess.
Or others that have
that have lived it in different ways.
That's a small.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's not worth talking about in a typical fashion, because it just sounds like I'm a cold prick. It's like, well, Yes, but
Right.
but no, that's not what's going on here.
Right. It's a lonely place. It's another cliche. It's entrepreneurship or just, business or life in general. It can be lonely.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say at the top.
Yeah.
That's a shitty depiction.
That's a stupid.
But on the journey to the top or whatever winning
wherever.
is, right? It can be lonely. In my book, I talk about the cost of ambition, and I kind of break down some of those. And the social cost of ambition is one of those that's kind of sneaky, because it can so easily lead to resentment, which is crippling in any relationship.
Yeah.
Kids, spouse, parent, siblings, friends.
Yeah.
Any relationship, resentment can just erode years of a bond, almost like that. And it's this two-way road where I've decided to do a thing. Let's say that my communication has been brilliant. I've outlined it. Let's say I'm using my wife. Like, here's what I want to do. Here's why. Here's the game plan. Here's the flow. Here's the timeline. Everything.
Yeah.
And she's like, tracking all. Perfect. Thank you. Go. Awesome. I'm off and running. I'm making changes. I'm doing things. Say it's my fitness. Okay. I want to lose some weight. I want to build muscle. I'm eating healthier. I'm doing all these things. She's right there. Let's say she makes no changes at all. She's not in that position to kind of go all in like I am, or even go at all in on this thing.
Sure.
Maybe at some point the resentment from her to me starts to happen, because what I'm doing is starting to make her feel bad about her. She's starting to see the way I'm changing. My body's looking different. I'm feeling more confident. I'm eating boiled chicken. She's still eating pizza or cheeseburgers or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like,
man, can you eat the pizza with me? Like, no.
Exactly
I'm
that.
on a diet. Yeah.
Right. So resentment from her to me.
Sure.
But also the flip of that is me to her. Like, I'm killing myself over here, man. You haven't changed a single thing. I start to resent her for her lack of initiation, for her lack of change and movement.
Yeah.
It can go both ways. And it's just this sneaky son of a bitch that's like waiting there for you, even if you go into it brilliantly again.
Sure.
With a game plan and the comms and all the things. It's like, this is likely to happen. So go into it with both eyes open, anticipate it, and don't make the mistake of thinking that one initial discussion is all that it's going to take for the duration of your journey. Yeah. It's got to be revisited and nurtured and adjusted and like all these things.
Well, and the quote that stuck into my head is, repetition doesn't spoil the prayer.
Yeah, that's a good one.
You go to church, you say the same thing.
Right.
Why is that?
Right.
You need to say the same thing over and over and over.
Yeah.
Have people, since you lost your leg, have people approached you in a different way?
Yeah.
Because it's very obvious.
Yeah.
You can't miss it. So
right.
Yeah. Has that just changed your interactions?
I mean, daily.
I'm sure.
I mean, day to day. I'll use two examples. One of which is my favorite is with young people, like kids. They have no filter.
Yeah.
I'm at the grocery store, right? And the 6-year-old, I hear this on a daily basis, is, Mom, that guy has a robot leg. It's a common thing. What I'm usually interested in is the reaction from the, let's say, parent in this scenario. Because usually it's one of two things. One, which is the most common, is it's not polite to stare.
Yeah,
don't
stare.
point it out.
Yeah.
Like, concern that what they just said would be inappropriate or I would take offense to it. Okay. That's most common. The other one is, why don't you go ask them what happened? Which I love. And I let the parent decide how they want this to play out. It's up to you. I'm going to feed off of whatever you do here. If you want to do the shunning of the way thing, I'm not going to come bombing in and create a scene between you and your child.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping that your response is, go ask them what happened. Which is so fun and cool.
That's super cool.
Right. So like, I stood out in public when I had 2 legs.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not a small dude. Big bald head tattoos.
Yeah.
I got it. Especially if I start talking Boston accent, it's like, what am I processing right here? You factor in a cyborg leg and I might as well be from another planet. I've gotten used to that. The head's turning and the eyeballs and like, it's cool.
Yeah.
The other example is, and how I just think now in general, is the opportunities that has provided me to be just that much of more of an asset, to create that much more of an effect in any type of environment. I'll use my military as an example. I won't say the location specifically, but we're in a country our senior leaders were having some challenging times influencing senior leaders in that particular place.
Mm-hmm.
I was strategically put into that environment, and we created a scenario in which the big dog from that place would be there for a certain reason.
Sure.
And I was there as well. And this individual took a look down where I was at, which was all done on purpose, and was like, immediately walks over to me. What's your deal? I don't see this very often. Okay. We're working through a foreign language. I tell him a little bit about my story. He's like, man, that's outstanding. Okay, great to meet you. I say, yes, sir. Same to you as well.
I see.
24 hours later, senior military commander in that area, working out of the embassy, right alongside the ambassador, calls me and says, hey, so-and-so wants to meet with you. I'm like, perfect. This wasn't just ironic, right? So boom, this right here was like the entryway into what needed to happen.
That's amazing.
Follow that rabbit trail, and
Sure.
like things turn around within a really short amount of time. So I use that example as there's quite a bit of my background that's staring people in the face right away.
Mm-hmm.
People make assumptions, and people tend to be at least somewhat accurate with those assumptions. Like, I'm a military guy. I hear thank you for your service on a daily basis, which is amazing.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily walk around with a t-shirt that says I am a soldier. People just look at me and assume I'm a service member.
Well, if I think SF, you kind of fit the mold.
Sure.
Like knowing nothing about SF.
Right.
Like if a SF guy, action figure, you'd
There you go.
probably
So
not
like
far off,
with an assumption and an image projection that you are aware of, in most people's minds, it's a tool that you can take advantage of, and you know what that is.
Yeah.
It's not to manipulate. It could be, but it's more to influence and inspire and create an effect. So you see it for the resource that it is, and you use your tools.
I've recently come to appreciate. So I'm small, as you have probably noticed.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always viewed it as a liability. It's like, especially as a man, it's like, I can't go on Tinder because you have to put your fucking height. It's like 5'6".
Is that a requirement
Fuck
on
this
Tinder?
guy. No, it's
Is that a thing?
I feel like it's on
I
the
missed
dating apps.
I missed the online dating thing.
I've never been on
Okay.
Tinder, but I haven't. You have to see the height, and I've heard like if you don't have your height, that's not a good.
That's a flag.
Yeah, that's a flag.
Right,
Yeah,
okay.
you better be over 6 foot.
That makes sense.
So I'm well below 6, well below. It doesn't matter what kind of footwear I have on. And I've always viewed it as a liability, but then I've realized over the past 6-7 years, I've started to build some of the most intimate access to this industry that we serve, the civil construction industry, mining industry, that anybody has in the world right now, which is mind-boggling.
Right.
And then I've started to appreciate, wait a minute, it's because I'm young, small, and it's not just because of that, but like I don't intimidate anybody. I'm not a threat to anybody. And so I'm just like somebody's kid. And they'll just tell me stuff that I shouldn't know, that I should have an NDA signed for, or whatever it is, or they'll take me to places that I shouldn't be in. I have no business being in most of the places I go and the conversations I'm in, none of that. But it's just because I'm like a curious kid. And so they just invite me in.
Right.
And I've been able to build upon that, which has been a great thing.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's such a phenomenal example of that.
I didn't even understand it until like a year ago, and then I realized, wait a minute.
I mean, just the amount of self-awareness and humility and confidence that is required for you to have that degree of perception is impressive.
Well, it's better than being self-conscious about it all the time.
And like how long, like where does that even end? Nowhere. It doesn't. Like this is it, bro.
Yeah.
Okay. We could work on this if you want to, but like vertically,
it's what I got.
That's
man.
it, bro. Yeah. This is where you're at. It's funny you mentioned this. I was on a call yesterday with a former detachment commander I worked alongside of. This is yesterday. It's a true story. He's now he's either in Harvard or MIT. He's getting like a ton of different degrees to do stuff with. He's like, hey man, I got to do this assignment. I need some feedback. Like when we were working together, what was my like superpower or something? I had to do some like presentation on something. He's a little dude. Little dude. I think he's half Chinese, half Irish. So he got a very interesting look. Clearly, like there's like some Asian in him for sure.
Yeah.
Little dude. He's like 5'6" ish.
Yeah, about my size. Yeah.
Okay. Little dude.
Yeah.
And this was yesterday, but I was reflecting when we were working together, and I said, "Listen, dude. What comes to mind to me is this impressive combination of confidence and humility that you were able to fuse together as a leader. And if I use myself as an example, it would be easy to see me and think this knuckle dragging rock jock meathead, right, is the dumbass muscle bound, like I'm gonna hear some like just stupidity out of this fucking animal, right? This isn't a brain, this is a brawn, and like you could assume that may be the case. And then let's say I say something remotely intelligent, it's like, well, I wasn't expecting that. Like, look what just happened. With my buddy, it's almost the opposite of that, because he's got this confidence about him. First you see a little tiny small Asian child and you're like, what is this? But the way he carries himself and his demeanor, and he's done the work, he's done the preparation. He comes in, all of a sudden it catches you off guard. You're like, what is happening right now? I don't know what it is, but like, you're a warrior and you seem ready to go. And now I'm in. You own me. I'm like, let's go. All that can happen so fast, but it doesn't if you don't have the perception of that projection that you give and how you can take advantage of it.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So good for you. That's impressive, man.
I appreciate it. Going back to the parents saying, hey, that's rude. Don't say that. Why do you think that is? Because I think kids are amazing because they don't have a filter. So I think you can understand a lot of humanity through children, because they're saying what's going on, but they don't have that societal whatever it is filtering out the stuff that they're thinking or that I'm thinking. Why do the parents, like, why is that something?
I would say it's a general misconception that the individual that has some type of uniqueness, abnormality, standoutness to them is something that they're ashamed of, something that they would rather not discuss, something that to address would create like an emotional negative effect. The irony is, when you enter this world of adaptive human, handicapped, disabled people, like whatever, you can call me whichever one you want, it makes no difference. That's usually not the case. Most are humorous about it. They joke about it,
which I love.
They talk shit about themselves and others that have similar circumstances. One of our speakers that works with us, she's a quadriplegic. She was in a cheerleading accident. It was one of the flyers. Boom, snapped C1, C2. Should have died for sure right there on the gym floor. Able to bring her back so she can shrug her shoulders a little bit and she can move her head. But everything else, dead stick. Her and I were on a call just a couple of days ago. We were refining one of her presentations. She just, this is who she is. She's been this way for like 30 years. We'll talk about, answer any question, joke about it. So it's a misconception, because I say under most circumstances, they know they're in a wheelchair. They know they have one leg. It's not like you're bringing something to their attention that they're like, oh my God, you're right. I do have a robot leg.
I thought about that.
What the fuck happened? I need to figure this problem out right now. It's like, this is the way it is. So I think it comes from a good-hearted place where the parent doesn't want to offend somebody. But I would say, generally speaking, that individual would be more than happy, actually, and actually maybe even look forward to the opportunity to answer a couple questions for a kid about what happened to him.
Well, and it's part of them. It's part of your story. It's part of who you are. And so I enjoy talking to people about it, because it's unique and there's always a story there.
Interesting.
And I haven't, not a single time has somebody, and if somebody says, hey, I don't want to talk about that. Cool. But I've not a single time has that happened to me, at least.
Right.
Well, I guess the kitchen is open up next door, so it's starting to get noisy. But you've referenced a book. What's your book for people to find it?
Objective Secure.
Objective Secure.
Yeah.
And you publicly you speak at events, or
I do.
You consult.
Yep.
So you're available for people to bring you in.
Correct.
And how do they find you?
Website. Yeah. Teammachine.com.
Team Machine.
Machine is MCHN. And that's got me and all of our other assets, offerings, product,
Nice. So
social medias.
company could reach out to you, bring you in, or
100%.
something like that.
Yeah, we do it all the time, man.
Awesome.
I hit the road tomorrow on the next road trip of 4 or 5 events.
It's nice when you can line events up.
Yeah, it does help. You can kind of bundle because it's like boom, 4 or 5, knock them out. Boom, transition, army work, family work, and kind of get that rhythm. It doesn't always, it doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes it's like you're doing the one-offs.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's good.
Right on. Well, it was really good to meet you. I appreciate you coming down with everything.
Great time,
on.
man.
Yeah.
I could do this another hour. So
yeah, I could too. But yeah. No,
appreciate
really
you, brother.
it. Right on. Sweet. Yeah. No, that's
bingo.